You wake up, not with purpose, but with instinct. Check your phone. Notifications light up the screen like a miniature sunrise, a like, a comment, a message that says, "You're doing great." It should make you feel something. But instead, there's only a hollow echo. Like a vending machine spitting out a prize you didn't ask for. You scroll through filtered smiles, motivational quotes, a new podcast on how to optimize your life, a reel that promises to unlock 3 habits to be instantly happier. You save it, just like you saved the last one. And still, the weight stays. Light enough to carry, heavy enough to notice. It wasn't always this way, was it? There was a time when happiness felt simpler, a summer afternoon, a burst of laughter, with no audience, a feeling so raw it didn't need a caption. But now, it's different. Now happiness is a project, a checklist. Meditate, journal, manifest, hustle, smile. And if it doesn't work, try harder, because that's the promise, right? Happiness is just around the corner. In the next achievement, the next version of yourself, the next algorithm-friendly dopamine spike. It's coming, as long as you don't stop chasing it, but something strange starts to happen. The more you pursue it, the more it slips away. You listen to another podcast, but forget what it said. You buy the book, but don't read past chapter 1. You light the candle, play the relaxing playlist, and still, the quiet never comes. You begin to wonder, is it me? Am I broken? Is everyone else really this happy or just better at pretending? And then, a darker question forms, one you're almost afraid to ask. What if happiness was never meant to be pursued? What if the very act of chasing it is what makes it vanish? This isn't just a personal problem. It's a cultural one. A billion-dollar machine is built on the idea that you're not quite there yet. That happiness is a product, purchasable, programmable, postable, but never truly possessed. We are told to smile more, to be grateful, to visualize success. 2. Curate a life worth envying. And if the feeling doesn't arrive, that's your fault. You didn't try hard enough. We've created a paradox. A society obsessed with happiness, I can't seem to find it. A generation chasing joy like a mirage, always shimmering, never reachable. And worse, we're starting to believe that the chase is the meaning, that life is a problem to fix, that our emotions must be managed, upgraded, or rebranded. But maybe happiness isn't something to unlock. Maybe it's something that emerges when you stop trying so hard to feel it. Maybe it's not a pursuit, but a side effect. This isn't about giving up. It's about waking up to the unsettling possibility that we've been looking in the wrong direction all along. In this video, we'll dive into that possibility. We'll unravel the history of how happiness was redefined. We'll explore the brain's strange response to desire. We'll expose how systems profit from your search. And most importantly, we'll question the very foundations of what it means to live a good life. Because if chasing happiness makes it disappear, what happens when we finally stop running? The pursuit of happiness feels so natural today that questioning it seems almost absurd. We treat it as an unquestionable truth, the gold standard of a life well lived. But this wasn't always the case. For most of human history, happiness wasn't something you chased. It was something that emerged slowly, quietly, when life was in balance, when values are aligned with action, when the self was not at war with itself. In the ancient world, happiness was not a commodity nor a mood to be optimized. To the Stoics, it was eudaimonia, a kind of flourishing that came from living in accordance with reason and nature. It wasn't a feeling you could summon at will. It was the result of discipline, of virtue, of learning how to suffer well. Epictetus didn't teach his students to pursue joy. He taught them to embrace fate, to accept what is beyond their control. and to find peace not in the world's changing weather, but in the steadiness of their own inner character. The Buddhists, too, saw something dangerous in desire. The more you cling to fleeting pleasures, the more suffering you invite. Happiness, they argued, comes not from accumulation but from detachment, from releasing the grip of craving, from dissolving the illusion of the self that always wants more. In both cases, whether Greek or Eastern, happiness was seen not as a pursuit but as a consequence, a side effect of something deeper. Even Epicurus, so often misunderstood as a champion of pleasure, believed that the highest form of happiness was found in modesty, self-reflection, and philosophical friendship. He warned against chasing indulgence, for it inevitably leads to pain. To him, happiness was the quiet harmony of a mind untroubled by unnecessary desires. But something changed. With the Enlightenment came a radical shift. Thinkers like John Locke began to redefine human nature in terms of individual rights, autonomy, and self-interest. And with that came a powerful new idea, that happiness was not just a personal hope, it was a political promise. The American Declaration of Independence boldly declared the pursuit of happiness as a foundational right. But what exactly were we being promised? And what kind of happiness were we being taught to pursue? In the centuries that followed, as industrialization accelerated and capitalism became the dominant economic force, happiness was gradually extracted from its philosophical roots and grafted onto something else entirely: productivity, achievement, and consumption. The quiet contentment of the soul gave way to the restless ambition of the self. You were no longer expected to be good. You were expected to feel good. And if you didn't, well, maybe you just needed to buy something. The 20th century turned this mutation into machinery. Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, pioneered modern advertising by tapping into unconscious desires and redirecting them toward products. Happiness, in this new age, became a tool of persuasion, something you could promise, package, and sell. A cigarette became a symbol of empowerment. A car became a cure for loneliness. A brand became a personality. By the time Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World in 1932, the trajectory was clear. His dystopia wasn't built on fear, but on pleasure. Citizens didn't rebel because they were oppressed. They didn't need to rebel. They were kept in a constant state of shallow satisfaction. At the center of it all was a drug called soma, handed out like candy, numbing every trace of discomfort. It was synthetic happiness, effortless, controllable, and utterly hollow. We like to think that it was fiction. But scroll through any app today and soma lives on, just rebranded. It's the treat yourself mentality. The motivational mantras layered over luxury lifestyles. The self-care routines that often feel indistinguishable from soft-marketed product placements. The cultural signal is subtle, but constant. Happiness is something you earn, something you purchase, something you construct with the right tools, apps, and advice. This is the historical rewiring of joy. We've gone from asking, how can I live a meaningful life, to how can I feel better right now? We've shifted from cultivating character to chasing feelings, from aligning ourselves inwardly to upgrading ourselves externally. And in doing so, we've confused stimulation for satisfaction, novelty for nourishment, and performance for peace. This transformation wasn't random. It served a function. A society obsessed with happiness as a product, as a performance, as a right is easier to market to, easier to distract, easier to manage. When happiness becomes the goal, discomfort becomes a failure. And people who feel like failures are much easier to sell to influence, and to keep running endlessly on a treadmill. They were never meant to escape. Understanding this historical shift isn't just about critique. It's about clarity. Because if we've inherited a definition of happiness that was designed not to serve us, but to serve systems, then perhaps the first step toward real joy isn't to chase it harder, but to question where the chase even came from. It's an idea we've been sold again and again, that if you just work hard enough, optimize every habit, master the right mindset, you'll finally unlock lasting happiness. But the strange thing is, it never quite works that way. Even when we get what we want, the job, the partner, the praise, the high fades, the joy flattens, and before long, we're left with the same restless hunger that pushed us there in the first place. This isn't just a personal flaw. It's a deeply human mechanism, and to understand it, we have to look inward into the strange machinery of the brain itself. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill. It's the tendency for us to return to a baseline level of happiness, no matter how positive or negative the change. Win the lottery, and after the initial thrill, you're likely to return to the same emotional set point you had before. Suffer a tragedy, and after the shock subsides, many return, surprisingly, to a similar level of contentment. It's as if our emotions operate on a moving conveyor belt. No matter how fast we run or how far we think we've gone, we end up in the same emotional place. Why does this happen? The answer lies in how our brains reward us, and more importantly, in how they don't. Dopamine, the neurochemical often associated with pleasure, isn't really about enjoyment. It's about anticipation. It fuels desire, not satisfaction. The moment you get what you want, dopamine drops. The brain is built not to linger in possession, but to leap toward the next thing. This system evolved to keep us alive, to help us seek food, shelter, and status. But in the modern world, it traps us in an endless cycle of almost happiness. We're constantly reaching, but never quite arriving. This is why the pursuit itself becomes exhausting. You chase a feeling that, by design, dissipates the moment it's caught. The more you try to own happiness, the more it slips through your hands. This is the paradox. And it's not just biological, it's philosophical. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, observed this with piercing clarity. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote, "Happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue." In other words, happiness emerges indirectly, as a consequence of meaning, not as the goal itself. Frankl wasn't speaking theoretically. He witnessed some of the most horrific conditions imaginable, and yet still observed moments of profound purpose in those who endured. The ones who survived psychologically weren't those who obsessed over feeling good, but those who found something to live for, a loved one, a future task, a sense of inner responsibility. They were grounded in something deeper than the fleeting pleasures of the moment. They were tethered to meaning, and meaning, unlike mood, can carry us through suffering. Contemporary research supports this. Studies show that people who orient their lives around purpose, even if it involves stress, struggle, or discomfort, report greater long-term well-being than those who simply try to maximize pleasure. In fact, the more you try to directly manipulate your emotional state, the more unstable it becomes. You start treating your own mind like a broken machine. Every dip in mood becomes a red flag. Every moment of sadness feels like a personal failure. This hypervigilance breeds anxiety, not peace. This brings us to the rise of something quietly corrosive, toxic positivity. It's the cultural obsession with always being upbeat, grateful, and unbothered. On the surface, it sounds harmless. Who wouldn't want to feel good? But beneath it lies a deep intolerance for emotional reality. It tells us that sadness is weakness, that discomfort must be hidden, that the full spectrum of human experience must be flattened into constant cheerfulness. And in doing so, it isolates us from ourselves and from each other. The problem isn't just that this is unrealistic. It's that it turns happiness into a kind of surveillance. We begin monitoring our every thought and feeling, scanning for signs of negativity, self-correcting with affirmations, smiles, or positive vibes. But this constant self-monitoring creates a paradox. The more you focus on trying to be happy, the more anxious you become about not feeling happy. The very act of chasing happiness turns it into a task, a burden, a problem to be solved. It becomes work, and like all work done under pressure, it wears us down. Happiness was never managed. It's not a formula to solve or a finish line to reach. It's a byproduct of being present with life, not in control of it. But the modern psyche, conditioned by self-help mantras and performance culture, has internalized the idea that feeling good is something you must constantly strive for. And when you inevitably fall short, you're left not only with sadness, but with guilt for being sad and emotional double bind that quietly erodes your mental foundation. So here we are, trapped in a loop. The more we want happiness, the more we watch for it. The more we watch for it, the more we notice its absence. The more we notice its absence, the more broken we feel. And the more broken we feel, the more desperately we chase it. Round and round we go on a treadmill that was never meant to be escaped, only sold. But what if the problem isn't you? What if the real problem is the very idea that happiness should be pursued like a goal, tracked like a metric, optimized like a business? What if happiness, like sleep, only comes when you stop trying to force it? This is not a call to apathy. It's a call to curiosity. To step off the treadmill and ask the question we've been trained not to ask. What if chasing happiness is what's making us miserable? There was a time when human desire grew slowly, shaped by nature, community, and the rhythms of life. You wanted warmth when it was cold, water when you were thirsty, and comfort when you were in pain. But those were physical needs. They passed. They had limits. What we call modern desire is different. It's not born from lack. It's engineered, programmed, crafted in boardrooms, tested in focus groups, and deployed at scale, not to satisfy you, but to keep you wanting. Zoom out for a moment. Look at the architecture of the modern world. Every platform, every advertisement, every notification is built around one central premise, that you are not enough yet. But you could be, with a little work, a little money, a little more self-discipline. A better version of you is just around the corner. And it's always just far enough away to stay unreachable. This is not a coincidence. It's a system. A carefully calibrated trap. In the early 20th century, Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, helped pioneer a new kind of manipulation, the engineering of consent. He took Freud's ideas about unconscious desire and weaponized them for commerce and control. People didn't just want products, Bernays believed. They wanted identity, status, validation. So, he helped companies shift their messaging. Don't sell a cigarette, sell freedom. Don't sell soap, sell beauty. Don't sell a car, sell masculinity. Happiness became a story you could buy. And more importantly, one you could sell to yourself. From that point on, advertising stopped being about needs. It became about insecurity, about creating a sense of lack and then promising relief. But the relief never lasts because the system is built to renew your dissatisfaction endlessly. Every solution becomes the seed of a new problem. This is the loop. Convince people they are broken, then sell them the illusion of being fixed. Fast forward to now. The tools are more sophisticated, the scale is unprecedented, and the system is no longer optional. It's everywhere. Your feed knows you better than your friends. Your phone tracks not just what you buy, but how long you hover, how fast you scroll, what you stop to glance at when you think no one's watching. And behind every pixel is an algorithm not designed to inform you, but to keep you engaged. Not to feed your mind, but to stoke your desires. This is the algorithmic mirage, a landscape designed to promise happiness, endlessly, seamlessly, and invisibly. You see a post, someone smiling, traveling, succeeding. The image is crafted to look effortless, but it activates something in you. A hunger, a sense of falling behind. Suddenly, you want something. You don't know what, but you want it now. That's the power of the system. It doesn't need to tell you what to want. It just needs to make sure you're always wanting, and when the desire becomes unbearable, it gives you the cure. A product, a course, a lifestyle, a downloadable shortcut to a better you. But once again, the relief is temporary, because what you're chasing isn't happiness, it's validation. And in this system, validation is never given freely. It's borrowed, rented, measured in likes, reactions, and hearts that vanish as quickly as they appear. We've entered an age where happiness is no longer a private feeling. It's a performance. You don't just experience joy. You must document it, edit it, filter it, package it for visibility. You smile, not because you feel good, but because you know the camera is watching. You post, not because you're present, but because you're afraid of being forgotten. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to outsource your sense of self to a digital reflection. But the cost is invisible and enormous. In this system, your emotions are monetized. Your attention is currency. Your insecurities are assets on someone else's balance sheet. The more uncertain you feel, the more data you produce. The more you search, the more you can be predicted. The more you crave, the easier you are to sell to, and so the cycle continues. Culture manufactures desire. Technology amplifies it. Advertising exploits it. And you are left in the middle, confused, exhausted, and quietly convinced that happiness is just one step away if only you keep playing the game. But what if the game is rigged? What if the system was never built to make you whole, but to keep you chasing wholeness? What if the very structures promising joy are feeding on your longing? This isn't a call to unplug completely. It's a call to see clearly. Because until we recognize how our desires are shaped, how our cravings are fed back to us as if they were ours to begin with, we remain caught in someone else's story. A story written to keep us hungry, not fulfilled. Real freedom doesn't come from buying the right thing. It comes from seeing the mechanism that made you believe you needed it in the first place. And only when you understand the system, when you stop mistaking the mirage for the oasis, can you begin to ask the question that terrifies that system the most: what if I'm already enough? Beneath all the chasing, behind all the performance, there sits a quieter engine, the self, the one doing the running, the one managing the emotions, curating the image, adjusting the mask. In the West, this self is sacred. It's who you are, we're told. It must be sculpted, protected, and improved. Your happiness depends on it. And so, we become obsessed with managing the self, monitoring every mood, upgrading every flaw, bending every inch of identity towards some better, shinier version. But what if the self isn't a foundation to build upon, but a story we've been taught to believe? Alan Watts once described the Western idea of the self as a hallucination, a fiction that we mistake for reality. He wasn't dismissing the experience. He was challenging the way we relate to it. In Eastern philosophies, particularly in Taoism and Buddhism, the self isn't seen as a fixed identity. It's a process, a momentary arrangement of thoughts, sensations, and perceptions that arises and dissolves over and over again. Like a wave on the ocean, It looks separate, but it's inseparable from the whole. The wave isn't doing anything. It's just appearing. This view dismantles the core illusion we cling to, that there's a little controller inside our head, making decisions, pursuing goals, and chasing happiness like a project manager. But the more we believe in that controller, the more we begin to fear its failures. If I'm not happy, something must be wrong with me. If I'm not improving, I must be falling behind. And so we redouble our efforts. We monitor our thoughts, our routines, our progress. We build elaborate systems of self-help, all designed to fix a self that may never have been broken, only misunderstood. This is where suffering hides, not in the pain itself, but in our attempt to control it. We don't just feel sadness, we feel the failure of being sad. We don't just experience fear, we panic over the presence of fear. And so emotion becomes pathology. Feeling bad becomes evidence that we're doing life wrong. We are caught in a loop of control, trying to manage the unmanageable, judge the unjudgeable, and perfect something that was never meant to be perfect in the first place. Mindfulness, at its root, is not about controlling thoughts or calming the mind. It's about witnessing, stepping back from the noise and watching it without trying to fix it. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, both build on this insight. You do not need to feel happy to live meaningfully. You do not need to solve every emotion to act with purpose. The goal is not to escape discomfort, but to expand your capacity to sit with it, without needing to change it. This is the quiet revolution. Letting go of the need to feel good in every moment, and instead learning to be with whatever arises. Not because suffering is noble or pain is glorious, but because resistance magnifies pain while presence diffuses it. When we stop trying to control our experience, something unexpected happens. The tightness loosens. The anxiety softens. The endless problem of how to be happy loses its urgency. The truth is unsettling, but liberating. Happiness was never a destination. And the self, the one we've been trying so desperately to fix, may be more like a shadow on the wall than a solid thing. You can't polish a shadow. You can only notice it, understand it, and stop mistaking it for the whole truth. We've been taught to live like CEOs of our own minds, managing, correcting, optimizing. But maybe the real skill isn't management. Maybe it's surrender. Not in the sense of giving up, but in the sense of giving in to the flow, to the moment, to the basic truth that life is not a task to complete, but a field to move through. Some moments bloom, others break. Both belong. This marks a turning point, because once you stop believing that happiness is something to catch, you stop running. And once you stop running, you can finally see. You can see that the thing you've been searching for, the peace, the ease, the joy, isn't at the end of some self-improvement program. It's quietly woven into the present, into the breath, into the pause between thoughts, into the world as it is, not as you need it to be. In this stillness, happiness is no longer a goal. It's not even the point. It's just one of many guests that visits when you're no longer trying to control who shows up. And ironically, it's in that letting go, that release of the illusion of control, that you begin to feel the very freedom you've been chasing all along. In a culture that whispers and sometimes screams that the goal of life is to feel good, to be happy, to remain comfortable at all costs, there is a quiet rebellion growing. It's not loud. It doesn't march. It doesn't sell books with glittering promises, but it exists. And it begins the moment someone stops asking, "How can I be happier?" and starts asking, "What is worth suffering for?" This is not a rejection of joy. It's a reordering of priorities, a refusal to let mood, unstable, temporary, impulsive, dictate the architecture of a life. Because when you live by how you feel, your life becomes unmoored. A shift in the wind, a moment of sadness, a single failure, and everything feels like it's collapsing. But the meaning is different. Meaning holds, it steadies you. It asks more of you, but it also gives more back. This insight is not new. It echoes through the words of thinkers who stared directly into life's absurdity and did not flinch. Friedrich Nietzsche, haunted by illness, isolation, and madness, wrote not of comfort, but of courage. He believed that he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Meaning, for him, wasn't handed down. It was carved through pain, through persistence, through the creation of values that were deeply one's own. Albert Camus, witnessing the devastation of war and the collapse of old ideals, called life absurd, but not meaningless. In the myth of Sisyphus, he imagines a man condemned to push a boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down again and again. Yet even here, Camus finds defiance. Sisyphus, though trapped, is not defeated. He becomes the absurd hero, not because he escapes suffering, but because he chooses to face it without illusion. And Viktor Frankl, perhaps the clearest voice in this conversation, speaks from the depths of real darkness. In Nazi concentration camps, stripped of everything, he observed that those who survived psychologically were often those who clung not to hope for comfort, but to purpose. A future task. A sense of meaning that existed beyond the present agony. In Man's Search for Meaning, he writes that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning and purpose. These are not abstract theories. They are survival strategies. And they remain relevant, perhaps more now than ever, because we live in a world of constant stimulation where pleasure is easy to access but hard to sustain. Comfort is sold everywhere, but often leaves us emptier than before. In this landscape, those who choose meaning over mood begin to look like outliers or maybe even revolutionaries. They are the artists who suffer for their work, not because they want to, but because the expression matters more than the pain. The caregivers who endure sleepless nights, not because they enjoy them, but because someone they love needs them. The resistance leaders who risk safety for dignity, because comfort means nothing without freedom. These people are not always happy, but they are anchored, and that matters more. Because unlike mood, which rises and falls with hormones, weather, and Wi-Fi signals, meaning persists. It gives context to suffering. It transforms endurance into testimony. It doesn't remove pain, it redeems it. To live for meaning is to move from the shallow waters of I want to be happy to the deeper current of I want to be alive for something. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. When your life is rooted in meaning, you stop fearing discomfort. You stop panicking when you're not smiling. You recognize that some of the most worthwhile moments in life, raising a child, building something beautiful, standing up for truth, are not always pleasant, but they are real. They are alive, and that's the quiet irony. The more you orient your life around meaning, the more happiness appears, not as a target, but as a byproduct. Not the euphoric spike of dopamine, but the slow warmth of alignment. You feel steady, not because everything is easy, but because it's worth it. This is the cultural rebellion. It doesn't sell well. It doesn't fit into 5-minute habits or algorithm-friendly slogans. But it offers something far more powerful than comfort. It offers significance. And significance doesn't fade when the mood does. It endures. It deepens. It carries you through. In a world obsessed with feeling better. This is the radical move. Choosing to live for something that matters more than feeling good. Think back to the beginning. The endless scrolling, the curated smiles, the self-help checklists, the morning routines, the optimized habits. The quiet sense that happiness is just around the corner. If only you tweak one more thing. If only you could figure out the right formula. That feeling of being almost there, but never quite arriving. Always one breakthrough away from peace. Now. Imagine, just for a moment, that you stop. You don't give up. You simply stop chasing. You stop monitoring every emotion. You stop auditing your life like a failing business. You stop believing that happiness is a reward for fixing yourself. And instead, you start listening, not to the noise of what you should feel, but to the whisper of what is.